So we gather now on Passover and Good Friday of this Holy Week, a week that should be called Resistance Week, Justice Week, Protest Week. We gather to hear the voices of those currently suffering the torture of solitary confinement.
He was put into the back of a police car and died on the floor in a jail, surrounded by people who are untrained and caring. They laughed and they mocked while he died in front of them.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. We'll start with some signs from the virtual rally of the No Rugers to Israel coalition. This coalition, which started last month, is calling for a stop to Ruger gun sales to Israel due to the scores, hundreds, or maybe even thousands of Palestinians injured by Israeli snipers using Ruger rifles. There are 14 or so groups involved in the campaign, including the national group, the American Friends Service Committee, the BDS Palestine Solidarity Working Group of the DSA, and Promoting Enduring Peace. For more information, go to norugerstoisrael.org. In other news, we mark the 10th year after the assassination of Giuliano Mer Khamis. His father was Palestinian, his mother Israeli. He was an actor and a filmmaker who created the shattering film Arna's Children. He led a successful effort to create the Freedom Theater in Jenin. He was shot dead outside the theater in 2011. No one has been arrested for the murder. News about Syrians. When we think Denmark, we tend to think of the enlightened countries of Northern Europe. But actually, Denmark since 2019 has been ruled by a political party that is strongly anti-immigration. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said she wants to aim for 0 asylum seekers applying to live in Denmark. The news is 94 Syrian refugees in Denmark have been told that much of Syria, including Damascus, is safe for them, and that their protected status in Denmark has been revoked. This is a picture of Akram Bathaish, who was one of those refugees in Denmark. Upon hearing of the news about his change of status, he had a heart attack and died. This is a picture of Feza Ibrahim Satouf. She came to Denmark several years ago and is now a nursing student. But she is one of those people who lost her protective status. And this week was 4 years since the 2017 chemical attack on Khan Shaykhun that killed 89 people and injured over 500. You may remember a picture of this man who had to bury these 2 daughters. On April 9th, Mark Colville faced sentencing for his role as a member of the Kings Bay Plowshare 7. You remember that the 7 broke into a federal facility in Georgia and damaged a model of a submarine armed with nuclear-tipped missiles. They argue there was a necessity to alarm and alert the public, who is lulled by bland acceptance of using these weapons that can cause a war that could kill billions of people. The judge in the sentencing ignored the argument about nuclear weapons and sentenced Colville to 21 months in federal prison, less the 15 months he's already served. Earlier, though, she acknowledged that she had received a stack of mail calling for Colville's release, and it may have influenced her to give Colville the minimum sentence in the range of sentences that probation authorities had recommended. The Plowshare 7 are also liable to pay the government $33,000 in damages. Colville called one sentencing witness, Stephen Cabeza of New Haven, who eloquently explained how the dangers of nuclear war are unheeded by government and the courts. Some good news. We had a bit of video last week about the April 2nd rally to support a law that would ban the use of solitary confinement in Connecticut. The bill has met its first hurdle, getting out of the Judiciary Committee. Now people need to reach out to the entire legislature and Connecticut Governor Lamont. Call on them to support this important bill. Here's some more video of the rally.
Hello everyone, and thank you for coming out on this freezing cold day. But this issue is important to us, and so we're going to make this brief, but we want to make sure that we acknowledge today is Good Friday, and it's also the Holy Week of Passover. And so, so that I don't mess up what Passover's about, I'm going to bring up our first speaker. And for those who don't know, my name is Barbara Fair. I'm an organizer for Stop Solitary Connecticut. I'm also on the steering committee. And I want to bring up one of our members, Miss Allie Perry, Reverend Allie Perry. And she's going to talk to us about the significance of today as it goes with Passover. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you all for showing up on this cold day. Yes. You know, Good Friday is always raw and cold. Yeah, it always is. Anyway, we are exactly where we need to be on this day when Christians mark Good Friday and Jews are observing Passover. Here on the steps of the Capitol, speaking out against torture and calling for justice and passage of the PROTECT Act, Senate Bill 1059. Both religious observances, Good Friday and Passover, are profoundly political. What is Passover, after all, but the liberation of people from enslavement, freedom from oppression? And Good Friday, what's Good Friday? It's the story about Jesus being abused by Roman soldiers, spat upon, stripped, humiliated, and then tortured by a state-sanctioned crucifixion. And what was Jesus' crime? He had challenged the empire. He had confronted the Roman and religious authorities, the powers that be of that day. He had rebuked their exploitive ways, condemned their oppression of the poor. He had questioned their legitimacy of their authority and denounced their violence, saying, "No more of this." Like Moses, who confronted Pharaoh and led the Israelites out of slavery, Jesus confronted the empire. He had counted the cost, he knew the risk, he knew the authorities were plotting to kill him. But like Moses, he had heard the cry of the people. Jesus also saw and heard the suffering of the poor in Palestine and could do no other than to advocate on their behalf. So we gather now on Passover and Good Friday of this Holy Week, a week that should be called Resistance Week, Justice Week, Protest Week. We gather to hear the voices of those currently suffering the torture of solitary confinement and to raise our collective voices and to say, no more of this. No more of this.
This is where we need to be. This is where all the voices of resistance need to be. Because what we're asking for them to do is the same thing that Jesus asked them to do. To stop oppressing people and stop torturing people and stop taking advantage of people. And that's all we're asking. Amen. We're asking that the people are behind bars, they've been sentenced already. That was their punishment. And once they get in here, that's it. They just serve their time. It's not about abusing people, breaking people, shattering their minds. All that was not part of the sentence that they received. And so we're here to continue our resistance right up until the day that our bill is passed, which is the PROTECT Act. It will pass, and we're going to make sure that it's not watered down like it was the last time. We want to see transformative change happening in Connecticut. Okay, I want to bring up a couple of people just to read some letters from the people who are inside the prisons right now. They wrote letters from the jail cell. They wrote letters to support our bill at our public hearing. And so we want to make sure that their voices are amplified in public. So if I can have one person who has a letter, thank you, to come up and read that letter.
Thank you, Barbara. My name is Will. I'm with the ACLU Smart Justice. I'm going to be reading a letter from Victor Rodriguez. Right now, he's currently incarcerated in New Haven Correctional Institution. So I'll be reading that right now, his testimony. His testimony for the PROTECT Act, SB 1059. I'll be narrating it as he wrote it. My name is Victor Rodriguez. I'm a resident of New Haven, Connecticut, and I support the PROTECT Act 100%. At the moment, I'm currently incarcerated in New Haven Correctional Facility. I personally experienced prolonged isolation, first at Northern Correctional Institute, Unit 2 West, Cell 102, in October 2017. I was placed in cell restraints for 32 hours due to a mental health situation that was happening. I was mentally and emotionally torn apart. I was getting treated more like an animal than a human. To this day, I am scared and paranoid to speak to anyone about any type of problem I'm going through because I feel like I'll be placed in restraints again or even worse. Being in the situation that I was caused me to have PTSD, it made my depression get worse than it was. No person should go through torture and pain that I've experienced, especially if one another already has a mental health illness. I support the act and it must be included in the bill. Sincerely, Victor Rodriguez, inmate number 416975. Thank you.
Have another person come up and read another letter.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Terry Ricks. I'm a Smart Justice leader with the ACLU Smart Justice. I'm going to read a letter from Carlos Baez. He says, testimony for the PROTECT Act. Read out loud. Bill number SB 1059. My name is Carlos Baez. I'm from Waterbury, and I strongly support the PROTECT Act. I am currently incarcerated. I have experienced prolonged isolation firsthand at Cheshire CI, where I was in a cell for 30 days all by myself. My request to be placed with another inmate was ignored. I witnessed other prisoners in cell restraints, and the sight was a hurtful thing to see. It's like they were animals. I also personally suffered from soft restraints, 4-point, in which was very torturing. Ending abusive restraints is essential to protect incarcerated people. I support this provision and it must be included in the bill. Carlos Baez, inmate number 340299. Please support the PROTECT Act bill. Thank you.
Friday, April 16th, there will be a rally at noon at the Capitol in Hartford to press for an end to police shootings. Supporters are from the groups Justice for Jason and Justice for Mubarak Soleimani. We're now going to talk about another police issue. This one not involving a police shooting, but what his family and their attorney called death by police negligence. It's the case of Stephen Barrier. Back in 2019, Barrier, who had mental issues, was suffering an episode. His mother called police and explained the situation. By that time, Barrier had left the home, but police said that the mother should call them when he returned. She did that, and she now explains what happened.
My name is Valerie Jada. I am the mother of Stephen Barrier. October 23rd, 2019 was a very sad and dramatic day for me and my family, which will be for the rest of our lives. Instead of celebrating Stephen's 23rd birthday, I was notified that my son died while in the custody of Stamford PD. That left me with a giant scar in my heart that no parent, mother, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, grandparents should have to go through. My son did not have to die. He was having a mental health crisis, and instead of being treated by doctors and therapists, he was surrounded by the police. I told them that my son needed urgent psychiatric help, but the police handcuffed my son and dragged him down a steep hill in the pouring rain. He was put into the back of a police car and died on the floor in a jail, surrounded by people who are untrained and uncaring. They laughed and they mocked while he died in front of them. Clearly, you can see that there was no respect for Stephen's life as well as his civil rights. I have been a respiratory therapist for 14 years, and what I saw Stephen go through on that video show how much distress he was in. He could not walk. He was having trouble breathing. He asked for some air and was crying for help. Based on that, the police should have taken Stephen to Stamford Hospital. The hospital, the Stamford Police Department stated that they were not licensed in CPR and EMR, although they were supposed to be. The police also said they needed to have a defibrillator near the jail. That puzzles me. The state attorney, Richard Colangelo, issued a statement stating that there was no evidence that there was no use of force in taking Stephen into custody. And his death was a simple result of natural causes. If this young, healthy 23-year-old was going to die of natural cause, why didn't he die at home? Why didn't he die at home? Last year in Connecticut, the police killed another Black man with schizophrenia named Mubarak Solomon, and another young man of color suffering from mental health crisis named Jose Soto. In this situation, the families told the police that their sons needed psychiatric help, just like I did. But now, all our sons are dead, and they are never coming home. This mistreatment of mentally ill patients by the police has to stop. In honor of my son, Stephen Barrier, and everyone who the police had harmed in this humane way, we need to find a better way. That is why we are bringing this lawsuit. I wanted a new law in the name of my son, Stephen Barrier, for the pain the Stamford Police Department put him through in the last hours of his life, and for leaving me with a giant pain in my heart. Stephen's presence is missed each and every day. I cannot forget all those phone calls he made, checking up on me, looking through the window to see what time I was coming home. I will always be looking for him, but I will never able to see him again.
Now from the family attorney talking about the lawsuit.
Earlier today, we filed a very detailed complaint, but the issue is simple. The Stamford Police Department's inhumane treatment of Stephen Barrier, which we believe directly caused his untimely death on his 23rd birthday. The police department discriminated against Stephen based on his disability and his race and violated his constitutional rights, we allege in the complaint. If someone is having a mental health crisis, they absolutely should not be treated by the police in the way we just saw in this video. Rather, mental health counselors should have been called to the house that night, as opposed to the police returning to arrest Stephen. As we allege in the complaint, Stephen was a 22-year-old having a schizophrenic episode when the Stamford Police Department arrested him. Stephen's mother had informed the police of that fact. They knew Stephen personally and were aware of his condition, but instead of providing emergency psychiatric services, Stamford police chased him up a hill where Stephen collapsed in exhaustion. Then the police took him down the hill, essentially declared that they would drag him down the hill in the rain and allowed his face to be, he was in a prone position, his hands handcuffed behind his back, 4 officers at least, one holding each arm and one holding each leg. And in that fashion, they took him down the hill through a wet hill, describing as they're coming down whether he was still breathing, questioning as he had trouble breathing. As the complaint alleges, the police department failed to call mental health team services, even EMS, at the outset to de-escalate rather than escalate the situation. And this failure, as they apprehended Stephen in a combative manner, rather than in a manner necessary to address somebody who was having a mental health crisis, resulted in him running away. And when they reached up to him, he was very fatigued under the immense stress and exhausted. And this obviously meant that his body was depleted, his heart was depleted of the oxygen that it needed. Had EMS arrived and taken care of him at that point, his vital signs would have been measured, his oxygen addressed, needs addressed, his needs otherwise to be stabilized, whether it's his blood pressure or heart rate would have all been addressed by EMS, and he would have been taken to the hospital. The hospital was closer to that hill than the police department where he was taken to. The fact that the police were aware of his circumstances is clear because approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours before this incident, the family had called because of a domestic violence, as Steve was having a tantrum and fighting with his mother and his sister. And when the police arrived, they spent considerable time talking to both his mother and his sister and learning at this time his entire history and how the episode that he was going through that night. And so they instructed the family to please call us when he returns. And so he did return later that night quietly, went down to his room, and that's when they called the police. So when they came back, there was no question that they knew that they were there to address a mental health crisis. The complaint alleges that the police aggravated Stephen's medical and mental health conditions with unnecessary chasing and unwarranted force and brutality, including the things that I mentioned about the way they didn't address him with EMS at the top of the hill, the way he was taken down the hill, which just, when you take down someone and carry somebody in that fashion, you are exhausting them further. You are creating more stress and fatigue on their body. You are causing a heart that is already tired to work even harder, that needs oxygen, and not being able to get it because his coronary arteries were not able to keep up with the demand that was being placed on his body by the police at that time. But there was nothing wrong with his heart. And had he been allowed to rest rather than exhausted even further, he would be alive today.
Last August, there was a justice for Stephen Barrier March in Stamford. One witness I talked to said Stamford police were provocative toward it from the start and interfered with it, and then arrested 6 of the peaceful street marchers after sending several of them to the ground. Protesters face charges ranging from breach of peace to the very serious inciting to riot. A group, Stamford Mass Defense Coalition, has a petition going around calling for all charges to be dropped. They have over 1,000 signers. You can find them on Instagram. That's our program for today. Stay safe, folks, but stay active. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.